Alright guys, it's September, so I decided to do another Clash Royale tier list where I rank every single card in the game. Obviously, we've had some pretty big meta changes now that the Evolved Royal Recruits are in the game, and also the Evolved Knight and the Evolved Barbarians got an emergency nerf, and on top of that, there's just been some meta shifts in general. S tier means the card is very overpowered, or it's just very versatile and needs a nerf. A tier means it's above average, maybe doesn't quite need a nerf. B is around average, the higher end of average. C is average or the lower end of average. D means the card is below average. It's not that versatile. F means it's not really versatile at all, or it needs a buff. Starting off with the archers, I'm going to say they're in D tier right now because for the most part, they're only viable in Expo, so they're not that versatile. Arrows are going in A tier. They're one of the best spells in the game right now, and they're very good against a lot of different bait and swarm cards. Baby Dragon is C tier right now. It's alright, it's about average, but there's some better flying cards than it right now. With that being said though, it's still pretty solid in Graveyard. The Balloon is going in B tier right now. It is very strong inside of Lava Loon in the current meta, but with that being said, Buildings and NATO are going to be very effective at taking it out. Bandit is C tier. She's pretty solid inside of bridge spam decks, but I think overall she's very easy to counter with things like goblins, skeletons, or other distractions. The Barbarian Barrel is going in A tier. It's common for spells to be kind of on the higher end of tier list because a lot of them, especially the cheaper ones, are pretty versatile, and there's just a lot of uses for the Bar Barrel especially. You could use it on defense, offense, and it pairs very well, especially in a lot of different beatdown decks like Graveyard, Golem, Electro Giant, and more. The Barbarian Hut is going to be our first F tier card. It's just really bad. Spells are amazing against it, especially things like Poison and Earthquake. And even if you don't have a very good spell because of how expensive it is, you can easily often punish it before it gets too much value. The Barbarians are C tier. Keep in mind, these are just the regular Barbarians. I'm going to rank all the evolutions at the very end, so that'll include the Evolved Barbarians too. The regular, though, are just going to be around average at C because Fireball is very good at taking them out, and they're just pretty easy to kill. The bats are going to be in B tier. Right now, they're very strong inside of minor wall breaker decks. With that being said, though, they're very easy to kill with spells. Obviously, Zap and arrows are going to take them out easily, but they get a very good amount of value when they're tanked for by miners. The healer's going to be in F tier. I just think she's not that good. Even after she got that buff where she spawns in with a heal, she's not really needed in many decks, and Elixir Golem itself that she's commonly paired in is not that strong of a win condition either. Battle Ram's going to be C tier. I think last time I ranked it D tier. It moves up a tiny bit. It's a little better after that health buff it got. It's slightly more likely to connect to the tower, but with that being said, buildings are still going to be very good at stopping it. Bomb Tower's A tier. Right now, it's a very strong building, used a lot more than the cannon is right now. It's very commonly seen inside of minor wall breakers and hog decks right now. Also a great counter to the recruits, which are being played a lot after their evolution. Bomber's going to be D tier. I haven't seen it a whole lot recently. It used to always be played inside of Golem, but now there's just a lot better replacements that can be used instead. Bowler's going to be C tier. It's kind of an average card. Lumberloon Freeze, which was commonly used with the Bowler, fell off a bit. Cannon's going to go in B tier. The Bomb Tower is just a lot better than the Cannon is right now. With that being said, you can still use the Cannon inside of Hog decks if you want to, and it'll be pretty solid. Cannon Cart is going to be C tier. I feel like kind of like the Bowler, it fell off. It's not really that good anymore. You can use it inside of Bridge Spam or Drill Bridge Spam type of decks, but it's pretty easy to stop. I'm going to actually put the Cologne in F tier because I think Lava Cologne right now is just really bad and no one really plays it that much anymore. So the Cologne is pretty much unviable for the most part. Dark Prince is going in C tier. It's alright, it does some nice splash. It pairs very well with Goblin Giant, which is actually really good now after the buff. Dark Goblin's going in B, can be pretty annoying to deal with, very good inside of bait decks, it's very quick, but it can easily be taken out, of course, with arrows and logs, so it doesn't make it super OP. Earthquake is also going to go B tier right now. It's not insanely strong as a spell, you're mostly seeing it inside of Hog Rider decks, and it's not in much more than that at the moment. The Electro Drag is going to be in D tier. For the most part, you're only going to see this card inside of Golem, but even inside of Golem and Lumberloon Freeze, you don't even have to use it, and you could sub in something else instead if you want to. The Electro Giant's going to be C tier. It's not really that great right now, especially with all the evolutions, and there isn't really an evolution that pairs that well with it. Electro Spirit's going to be A tier. It just gets a lot of value for only one elixir. When you do use it, you can't really go wrong with it. I mean, it's going to get a lot of value inside of Expo and Royal Giant decks. The Electro Wizard's going to be C tier. I feel like it's not an amazing support card right now. There are just a lot of other support cards that outshine it at the moment, and it used to be a lot better, but it's kind of about average right now. The E-Barbs are also going to be in C tier. We got a lot of C tier cards so far. That's probably going to change pretty soon though. But yeah, the E-Barbs are kind of, slightly below average as well. I know a lot of mid-ladder players think they're annoying, but they're pretty easy to distract if you know what you're doing. Well, I lied. We got another C tier card, the Elixir Collector. It's kind of a gamble. It really depends on the matchup. In some matchups, it's going to be really obnoxious to deal with if you don't have a good spell. But if you do have a Fireball, a Poison, and especially an Earthquake, you're probably not going to have any trouble dealing with it, and it's not a super versatile card. The Elixir Golem's actually going in D tier because there's an Elixir Golem deck that recently became viable with the Evolved Barbarians and the Rage that is pretty solid and even used occasionally on the top of the ladder. This might surprise you guys, but the Archer Queen is going in A tier and not S tier. Some of the champions right now are not S tier because they just get outshined a lot by the evolutions. The Executioner is going to go in D tier. I think it's a little better after the buff it got, but in this recent meta, I just have not seen it that much, but of course you can get some pretty good value out of him with the Tornado in Hog X NATO, for example. Fire Spirit's going to go B tier. Gets quite a lot of value for only one elixir, but the other spirits, some of them anyway, are better than it. With that being said though, when it is played inside of cycle decks, it does very solid in terms of DPS. Fireball's gonna go in A tier, very consistent spell, going to be very good inside of a lot of different decks. Maybe you want to run it with Hog, maybe you want to run it with RG. Gets a lot of value, even in Bridge Spam Ramrod or another deck a lot of people are running right now. Firecracker's going to be in B tier. She's a bit better after the buff she got. Remember, this is the regular Firecracker, not the Evolved Firecracker. We'll get to the Evolved at the end. Fisherman's also going to go in B tier. It would be higher if he was more versatile, but because he's pretty much only good inside of RG, that's why he is B tier. Flying Machine is also going to be B tier. You could even argue it is A tier, especially with a lot of the Lava Hound we've been seeing recently, and it pairs very well inside of Lava Hound and also Recruits, which we're probably going to see more of, but for now, it's going to be B. The Freeze is going to go in D tier. It's definitely a little better than the Clone because we do see some Graveyard Freeze occasionally, which is a pretty strong combination. Furnace is going to go in F tier though, just because kind of like the Barbarian Hut, it usually doesn't get much value just because of all the Poison, Earthquake, and other spells in the meta. The Giant is going to be D tier. I just think he's pretty bad right now, especially with how much stronger the Goblin Giant is. There's really no point in using the Giant. The Giant Skeleton is going to be C tier. I feel like there's a lot of things that counter it very well, like the Evolved Barbarians, also the Mighty Miners, so it kind of fell out of the meta a little bit, but with that being said, it's still about an average card, and you could use it if you want to, maybe inside of a Loon or a Hog deck. Snowball's going to be B tier. It's pretty decent for that pushback, especially with all the Balloon in the meta. We've kind of seen a rise in some air decks, so it's pretty nice to have that pushback to buy you more time to defend. Goblin Barrel's also going to go in B. I think this rose a bit from the last list, just because with the Evolved Knight and how broken it's been, it pairs very well inside of bait decks, so bait decks have kind of made a comeback recently. Goblin Cage is going to be C tier. Kind of an average building. It's very good inside of Recruits right now, which is probably the only reason why it's C tier. Otherwise, it would most likely be D. Goblin Drill right now, I have to say, is probably D tier. I feel like it's not really that good. Large reason why is because after the Evolved Firecracker got nerfed, that broken deck with the Evolved Firecracker, not everyone is using anymore, so people are preferring to run other win conditions instead. The Goblin Gang is going to be B tier. It's been very solid ever since they added in that third Spear Goblin. And the Goblin Giant, oh my goodness, this is A tier. Believe it or not, guys, the Goblin Giant went all the way from F or D tier. It was there for such a long time, all the way to A tier. Who would have thought that the 6% health buff it got would have made such a massive difference? It's much more likely to get to the tower now, and with that 6% health buff, it just changes so many interactions, and with the Spear Goblins it just has so many opportunities to get a ton of value. We've even seen a return of Sparky because of it. Goblin Hut is going to be F tier. I just think it's pretty bad. I was debating putting it in D, but honestly, just no one really uses the Goblin Hut. I think it's pretty much as bad as the Furnace. Goblins are going to be our first S tier card, even though they aren't a champion or an evolution. It really feels like they're as strong as one sometimes. Now that there's 4 of them, they just do so much DPS. It's only 2 elixir, and they're a pretty versatile card too. Believe it or not, guys, the Golden Knight I think is C tier. It's very bad right now compared to the other champions. Ever since it got that nerf, the dash range, it has a really hard time connecting to things unless you pair it with the Tornado. So it's kind of the worst champion right now by far. The Golem is going to be C tier. We've kind of seen a little bit of a return of Golem. It was in D tier for a while, but it moved up because of the Skeleton Dragon buff. They've been seen inside of a Golem pump deck on the top of ladder with the Evolved Knight, which is actually kind of decent. The Graveyard is A tier, one of the strongest win conditions in the game. Who would have thought, or who's really surprised? Because, I mean, obviously the Evolved Knight pairs very well with the Graveyard. The guards are going to be C tier. I feel like they're a little worse than the Goblin Gang because they don't really hit air at all, but sometimes their shields can be pretty useful and they do pair pretty nicely inside of Lava Hound decks. The Heal Spirit's also going to be C tier. I feel like it's the worst spirit, but with that being said, it's still going to get quite a lot of value inside of Sparky decks and Bridge Spam decks. The Hog Rider is going to be B tier. I feel like right now it's nothing too crazy as a win condition. I feel like there's some win conditions that are better than it right now, like the Lava Hound, the Goblin Giant, and the Graveyard, but with that being said, it's still very strong with the Bomb Tower as well as the Mortar. The Hunter is going to be C tier. I feel like it's pretty much only good with Royal Giant, so because it's not too versatile of a card, it's not really going to be that high up. The Ice Golem is going to be D tier. I just think there's so many better replacements to it, such as the Knight, the Valkyrie, so you don't really need to be running Ice Golem, which is why you don't really see it in many meta decks. You see it in decks like 2.6 and Loon Cycle that aren't that good anymore. Ice Spirit's going to be our next S tier card, kind of like the Goblins. It's so versatile. It gets so much value for only 1 elixir, stalls cards for so long with that freeze, and is just so useful on defense. The Ice Wizard's going in C tier. It was in D, but I feel like with that spawn-in effect and for the current meta of it, with Splash Yard being one of the best decks in the game, I feel like it moves up a bit to the lower end of C. Inferno Drag is going in A tier in this meta because there's a lot of Lava Hound decks and also, you know, a fair amount of Royal Giant. The Inferno Drag has been incredibly useful, especially because there's less people running Lightning, because a lot of people need to run Fireball for the Evolved Barbarians. The Inferno Tower is actually B tier. There's a lot of people running Logbait Inferno Tower right now just because there's less people running Lightning with what I just said. That's why the Inferno Dragon and the Inferno Tower are better, because there's less Lightning in the current meta. The Knight is A tier, and this is just the regular Knight. I believe the regular Knight is A tier. This isn't even the Evolved, which again I'm going to get to at the end. The Lava Hound is also A tier. Part of the reason why is because it pairs so well with the Evolved Barbarians, and that's part of what makes Lava so good. Now, Lava has incredible defense. Before, it kind of lacked defense without having, you know, a broken evolution, but now the defense is good to go, so the offense of the Lava you can focus more on and just defend everything with the Evolved Barbs. The Lightning is C tier right now. This is why we're seeing more Inferno Tower and Inferno Dragon, because a lot of people are using Fireball or Poison instead. The Lumberjack is going to be B tier. In this current meta, Golem Lumberjack is pretty solid, as well as Lumberjack Ram Rider, which is one of the most popular decks in the game, so it's a bit better right now. Magic Archer's A tier. You could even argue it is borderline S tier. It's why that Magic Archer NATO Bomb Tower deck is so broken, the Remy Ellie deck, because the Magic Archer is basically a win condition at this point that is pretty much unkillable if you don't have a Fireball. Mega Knight is C tier. You could even argue it's D tier, but it's kind of on the lower end of average. Only mid-ladder players constantly complain about it. At the top of the ladder, very easy to defend, and you don't really see it much either. Mega Minion's also going to be C tier. There's just a lot of better flying cards that you could use instead, like the Inferno Dragon, also the Phoenix. Kind of spoiled the Phoenix, but oh well. Mighty Miner is going to be A tier. Not quite as strong as some of the evolutions, but definitely one of the best champions in the game and does a ton of DPS. The Miner is going to be S tier. I feel like even after all the nerfs it's gotten, it is still so solid. It's part of the reason why Lava is so good, and also Miner Wall Breakers, also Mortar decks, and, you know, many other things that you could fit it in. Mini P.E.K.K.A. right now is actually B tier because a lot of people are using it with the Goblin Giant, and it's a very good pair to that, so you can defend a lot of different things. The Minion Horde is D tier. I would say it's not really that great. Pretty easy to counter with arrows. It does pair well with the Skeleton King, but overall, I don't think amazing. Minions, on the other hand, I would give C tier to, because there are a lot of people who do like to run them with Lava Hound, so I do think they're a little bit better than the Minion Horde. The mirror is going in F. I mean, it's obviously not very valuable. You have to spend one more election to mirror the thing. The Monk, I'm going to say, is B tier. I think it's better than the Golden Knight, but I wouldn't say the Monk is too OP, because for the most part, the Monk you're only seeing right now inside of Royal Giant decks occasionally, so it's not really that versatile compared to some of the other champions. The Mortar, I'm going to say, is A tier. Even though it's fallen off slightly, it was an S tier, it's still insanely strong, especially the Evolved Mortar. This is just the regular, but the regular Mortar itself is very good on defense and also as a secondary win condition. The Mother Witch is B tier right now in this current meta with all the Graveyard, and also because the Mother Witch pairs very well inside a Goblin Giant, we have seen a rise in the usage of Mother Witch, and it's actually a pretty decent card now. Musketeer's going in A tier. I feel like she's always one of the most consistent support cards, way better than the Ewiz, which is why I put the Ewiz in C and Musk in A, because inside of cycle decks especially, everyone's going to be running Musketeer over the Ewiz. Night Witch is going to be D. I feel like with all the Fireball and Poison in the meta, I just think she's not really that good and not really versatile. P.E.K.K.A.'s also going in D. Very easy to distract, not good or versatile. Phoenix is A. I think finally it's no longer S, probably partially because of how broken the evolutions are, but with that being said, still definitely one of the, if not best, flying cards in the game right now. Poison is also A, just like the Fireball, going to be insanely good, very good against Graveyard, and pairs very well inside of Graveyard too, and just gets a lot of value. You can't really go wrong with it. It's a very safe card, safe spell to have in your deck. Prince is going to be C. I think he's just very easy to distract and counter overall. You could even argue he is D tier, and you know what? He might even be D tier, but I would say in some matchups he can be pretty annoying, so C is okay. The Princess is also going to go in C. She was D in my opinion, but she goes up because this meta right now, Log Bait, is pretty solid, so I think she's now an average card. I'm going to say the Rage is actually B right now. People are realizing it's one of the best small spells in the game. People are really liking to run it inside of Ram Rider and also inside of Sparky. It's getting quite a lot of value ever since it got that rework. The Ram Rider is also going to go in B because right now there's a lot of people running that Ram Rider, Lumberjack, Magic Archer, Bridge Spam deck with the Evolved Knight, one of the best decks in the game. So for that reason, it's actually a pretty decent win condition right now, and it does a pretty good against the Balloon, and more people are running Lava Loon. Rascals are going to be C tier. They're kind of average, even though they got that buff that helped them in this current meta. They're not great, and obviously things like Log are just going to kill them very easily. The Rocket's going to be D tier. Even though Logbait is better, I don't believe Rocket is the reason why. I still think Rocket is one of the worst spells right now ever since it got that damage nerf to towers, because you can't really Rocket cycle that well. People are mostly using it on defense for the most part. The Delivery, though, I'm going to say is C, because Minor Control with the Inferno and the Delivery is pretty decent right now, and that Delivery just gets a lot of value on defense. It's going to be very good against the Evolved Barbs, also the Sparky, Goblin Giants, things like that, so quite good. The Ghost is going to go in A tier. I think it's just an incredible support card. You see it a lot inside of Bridge Spam, RG, amongst other things. The Royal Giant right now is going to be B tier, and this is just the regular Royal Giant. The reason why the regular Royal Giant is kind of suffering right now compared to last month is because things like the Evolved Recruits are going to be pretty good against it, and also the Evolved Barbarians, which so many people are using, just wreck the regular Royal Giant really easily without it having much of a chance of getting to the tower. The Royal Hogs, I'm also going to say, are B tier. They're a little better now that there's Evolved Recruits in the game, but I think the Royal Hogs themselves are not that difficult to counter. The Recruits, and by the way, these are the regular Recruits, not the Evolved, are going in C. I truly don't think the regular Recruits are anything too crazy. I think they're an average card, but the evolution really helps them out. Skeleton Army is going to go in D tier. I think it's very easy to counter. I know mid-ladder players like it because it's very easy to use, but pretty much every spell is going to be good against it, and it's not too versatile. Skeleton Barrel is also going in D. I think kind of like the Skeleton Barrel, pretty easy to counter with spells. Skeleton Dragons, though, are actually going to go all the way up to B. They're an average card now. Ever since they got that health buff, we're seeing them way more frequently inside of Lava decks, and they're also very good inside of Mortar. The Skeleton King is going to be A tier. I think it's just right outside of S, doesn't quite make it, but easily one of the best, or, kind of an average champion right now, up there with the Mighty Miner. And the Archer Queen gets a lot of value, especially when he's paired with bait cards and also things like Tombstone. Skeletons are going to go in A tier. These aren't the evolved skeletons, but the skeletons and the evolved skeletons themselves are actually around similar strength. The Sparky right now is B tier. You might be wondering, why am I not putting it A? Because the Goblin Giant is in A, and they kind of go hand in hand. I think the Goblin Giant's a lot better than the Sparky. I think Sparky is not OP, but the Goblin Giant being OP is kind of what brought the Sparky back to life, and now it is kind of around an average or slightly above average card strength in the meta. Spear Goblins are also going to be in B. They're going to be very good inside of the Remy Ellie deck. Tesla's C. I thought it was going to be a little higher after the buff, but Bomb Tower is just so much better than it. Log is going to be S. Obviously, inside of the Remy Ellie deck, we're seeing a ton of Log. It's going to be very good inside of Hog, inside of RG, inside of Mortar. I mean, the list could go on and on. It's just an extremely versatile card. It doesn't matter how many times it gets nerfed. It just always stays on top as the best spell. Three Musketeers are going to be C, simply just because they're not very versatile, but in some matchups, like Lava Hound, for example, they're going to be very good against. Tombstone's going to be A, very good inside of Graveyard and Lava decks. Tornado is also going to be A. It's just consistently been one of the best spells in the game. It's obviously going to be great paired with the Rocket, and also if you're running Splash Yard or, the Remy Ellie deck with the Bomb Tower Nado, it's going to be a perfect fit in those decks. Valkyrie's going to be B tier. I just think she gets outclassed by the Knight. That's one less elixir and serves a very similar purpose. But with that being said, because of her splash, she can be useful in a lot of decks and situations. Wall Breakers are going to be A tier. They're one of the best win conditions in the game right now. They get so much value for only 2 elixir and are super annoying to deal with. The Witch is going to be D tier. I don't think she's so bad to the point where she needs a buff compared to the Wizard. I just want to emphasize that. The only reason why I'm putting Wizard in F is because I think he needs a buff more than the Witch. I think the Witch is a little more annoying than the Wizard because of the fact she spawns skeletons, so I would prefer to see the Wizard get buffed. So there might be a little bit of bias there, but I think most people would agree the Witch is a little better than the Wizard. Expo is going to be C tier. Some people are playing it. We're seeing it. It's pretty decent with the Evolved Knight, but at the same time, Evolved Knight's a good counter to it, so it's kind of like debatable. The Zap is going to be D. I think it's pretty bad. I personally think Zap could use a buff, or it would be interesting to see how the evolution with the Zap is going to be. Zappies are going to be B tier right now, and now, guys, we are on to the evolutions. Alright guys, so the best evolution in the game right now is the Evolved Knight. Even after the nerf, he is absolutely incredible, insanely versatile. He fits in pretty much just about every deck in the game. I mean, you can literally use the Evolved Knight inside of Goblin Giant decks and inside of Lava. If that doesn't scream broken, I don't know what does. There was about 150 people using it in the top 200 on the end season of Ladder last season, so that really showed the emergency nerf did absolutely nothing. The second best evolution in the game right now is the Evolved Barbarians. Kind of like the Evolved Knight, after the nerf, it pretty much did nothing and easily remained to be the second best evolution in the game, completely carrying decks like Lava Hound and also Bridge Spam decks, where we have seen multiple of those finish in the top 200 in the last season as well. Now, the next few are kind of a close call, and there's up for some debate, but I would say the third best evolution right now is the Evolved Mortar, even though it requires 2 cycles, because the regular Mortar itself is very good on defense. You can imagine having that Goblin and that extra health and fire rate is going to be very helpful in a lot of situations and interactions, and paired very well with the Miner or the Hog, it's pretty good, so I would say it barely ranks as the third best evolution right now. The fourth best evolution in the game right now is going to be the Evolved Royal Recruits. Now, don't get me wrong, obviously compared to the Evolved Knight or the Evolved Barbarians, they're not nearly as broken, which some people were saying, but guys, in certain situations and matchups, they are absolutely obnoxious to deal with, especially because they're only a 1-cycle evolution, and on top of that, they're a pretty decent counter as well to the Evolved Royal Giant, and also a very good distraction to the Evolved Mortar. Coming in as the 5th best evolution right now, it's going to be the Evolved Royal Giant. It took quite a hit after the nerf. He's still good. Of course, he is still viable because he's not even the worst evolution, but the ones I listed above him are just better and a lot more consistent and less likely to get a bad matchup. Coming in at number 6, and she's actually going to go in A tier, is the Evolved Firecracker. Now, I know this might be a surprise to you guys because I know a lot of mid-ladder players really hate the Evolved Firecracker, but if you look at the stats and check on the top of ladder, she is quite easy to deal with if you know what you're doing. With that being said, though, inside of some cycle decks like Minor Wall Breakers and also Hog, she can be fairly good in, but I still think she is one of the weakest evolutions, especially after that really massive nerf she got. And coming in at number 7, the last and the final evolution in the game, also the worst in my opinion, are going to be the Evolved Skeletons, because honestly, they're not even that much stronger than the regular skeletons. The only thing you're getting is you're just getting some more skeletons, but if the other person has a small spell, which they likely do, it's going to be so easy to take them out if you just go for a log, zap, arrows, something like that. But anyways, guys, that's going to be my list. Let me know what you think.